Hi, everybody. Welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A. Let me just get my Instagram going, and then we can dive into why I do this, and get into questions. Give me 1 second. All right, the Instagram is up and running. Welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A, Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm excited to be here with you as always. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. I'm here to talk about mind-body symptoms and how you can get relief from them. And the vast majority of all symptoms you're ever going to feel in your whole life are actually mind-body symptoms. So I want to talk about how to work on that. Now, this is why I do this Q&A, is because I had a lot of these mind-body symptoms myself at various points, and especially before I discovered the work of Dr. John Sarno. I did not understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand that I could get better, why I would get better, and I needed lots of answers. So my answers began with reading Dr. John Sarno's books. His books are amazing. I don't disagree with virtually anything that he says in those books, but I have expanded based on my understanding of what he was saying and what I've found in my own experience, ways to get relief from mind-body experience. So let's talk about what mind-body symptoms are. Mind-body symptoms can happen head to toe. Anything in your body that can already happen can happen for mind-body reasons. And what do I mean by that? I mean that thinking or feeling, if it goes in certain directions, can lead to all kinds of symptoms. Now, we know this to be true from an everyday standpoint with crying, let's say. That is a feeling state that leads to actual changes in the body where tears roll down your face. The same is true with blushing, where you get embarrassed, your blood flow changes, and this can happen in any system in the body. That's what people don't realize. It can give you shoulder pain. It can give you IBS. It can make your eyes blurry. It can do anything that the body can already do, and any symptom that it can have can happen for mind-body reasons. Now, why do I do this Q&A? Obviously, some of it is I want to get you guys answers. I want to be of help. But the main reason that I thought to do this Q&A is ever since I got better, I kept thinking about, what do people need? What do I wish had been there? And this is something I really wish had been there. So when I read Dr. Sarno, it helped me quite a bit, but I started to realize there's still some questions that I need to get answered, and I needed information. And here's the thing. Mind-body symptoms get better when your mind changes, when you get new information, or you feel a different way, or you're thinking a different way. And so the key to mind-body symptoms and getting relief, unlike medical conditions that need to be treated purely medically, mind-body symptoms, doctors can't figure out what it is, or whatever they're saying is going on has been debunked, and that's not what's going on. When you can't get answers, you need answers. When you can't get answers from the medical community, you got to get answers from the mind-body community. So I'm here to answer those questions. After I read Dr. Sarno, I met with a wonderful guy, Dr. Eric Sherman, and he answered my questions. And that, combined with Sarno, was enough to give me a sense of how I could get better and why I could get better. From that, I developed my own system for how to deal with mind-body symptoms. That includes acute symptoms and seemingly chronic symptoms. It includes problems you might have in relationships. It includes problems you might have in your relationship with yourself. So every question that I answer here today is going to be around my system. And the system is called the column system. And essentially, just to boil it down to its essence, it's 3 different ways of looking at symptoms. The emotions column describes how feeling states can lead to acute onsets and upticks in symptoms. That means when the symptom first comes on, or if the symptom's been there for a while, but then suddenly goes way up or goes down. It's all feeling states that lead to those changes. Many of you are going to come here asking me about questions that do not seem to change, that are seemingly chronic. I always use the words seemingly chronic instead of chronic because you're not stuck with anything. You really aren't. It seems that way because they don't break up, but why is that? If your thinking doesn't change and you've got the exact same information, then your brain and your body are going to be in the exact same loop with each other. And that's why it doesn't change. So information, confidence, and what I call bringing down doubt is the key. In the emotions column, we're going to get the emotional awareness to recognize what's driving onsets and upticks in symptoms. In the doubt column, we're going to use new thinking, new information to change your thought process and change the pattern with the body to break up seemingly chronic symptoms. Lastly is the power column. The power column is about your relationship with yourself. It's not actually about thinking or feeling so much, though there is thinking and feeling in it. It's more about how you feel aligned with yourself or not. Are you living the way that you want to live? When you're not, your body's going to object. And that is something that shows up usually in what I call symptom plateaus, where you bring down the symptom enough. You're not having seemingly chronic symptoms. You're able to manage or withstand acute symptoms, but you're just kind of getting stuck at a certain lower level. That's a symptom plateau. And that speaks to something in your relationship with yourself needs to change. There's a wish that the symptoms are expressing to get you aligned with yourself. So when I answer these questions, I'm going to be referring to these three columns: emotions, doubt, and power. And the symptoms tell me exactly where we need to go. So let's dive in. I see a bunch of people saying hi. Thank you for stopping in and saying hi, everybody. I'm going to take a couple questions and then we'll go from there. All right. Susan Sereno, good to see you here. Hi, Dan. I cleaned house today and I have a lot of burning and pain. I just don't get it. I've always been able to clean with no problem. All right. Now, the first thing I'll say is this. If you don't know what's happening, that's a form of doubt. Doubt comes in 4 different forms: fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and unanswered questions. Susan, if you think about which of these 4 is coming up right now, I would say it's confusion. You're not super scared because you've been doing this work for a while. You know that we're going to think about it. We're going to, figure out a way. But you're also not in what I call the positive side of doubt just at this moment. The positive side of doubt is lack of certainty and unanswered questions. Why do I call that the positive side of doubt? Because that is the forms of doubt that are the most workable. They allow you to, here's a way of thinking about it. If you said, if I knew the answer to this question, I'd be better off. I'd be more confident. If I knew what's going on here, I'd feel more certain. If it's moving you towards the positive, it's in the positive side of doubt. Susan, I would say you're voicing confusion here. You used to be able to clean with no problem, but here's the thing. You used to live in your own experience in such a way where mind-body experiences just weren't happening that much. So let me explain something. This is for Susan, but it's for everybody. Every human being functions in a certain way until they can't do that anymore. Whatever psychological defenses they were using, whatever functions they had, it changes. We don't stay in the same place. We grow, circumstances change. Sometimes a defense isn't working anymore. Now, when a defense doesn't work anymore, let's say a baseline one that happens sometimes in childhood, denial, where the kid is just, sometimes it happens in adulthood, but kids use it a little more often. They're just like, no, that's not happening. Well, that becomes harder and harder in our lives to maintain because we're confronted with too much reality. We know too much about it. We've thought too much about it. Denial stops working. Here's another good one. Well, not a good one. I actually hate this one, but the defense of projection. That's the defense where people say, by the way, let's talk about what defenses are, and I'll get back to projection in a second. A defense is something where your mind alters your understanding of something enough so that you feel better about whatever was bothering you. And usually the mind does not care by what means it does it. It just wants to get you to feel better. So projection is a way that people say, I didn't do that. You did it. They blame the other person, and then they feel more comfortable with what's going on in themselves. Now, that's what I call a primitive defense because it's really not cool to the other person. Most people move beyond that pretty quickly. They know that if they blame the other person, there's going to be a lot of conflict. They won't like it. They know it's unfair. We also live in a culture that, this is one good thing that has happened in culture, where we are more able or more inclined to look within and think about ourselves. So projection has really stopped working. The number one defense that's really working for everybody, and the number one defense that's being used, is the mind-body defense. What do I mean by that? I mean that our minds want to protect us from painful experience. And most of the defenses are known by now, but the mind-body defense is really not known well in society. Most people think, no, you have real pain, you have a real medical condition, you have a real structural issue, whatever they want to say. Society is endorsing all of these symptoms. And so the mind knows that's where it can hide most easily. A psychological defense functions best when it cannot be discovered. Much easier to not get discovered if you are endorsed by society, which this is. So, by the way, this is happening more and more. So, Susan, when I think about that you used to not get this, but now you do, well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, society has continued to move in this direction, so you'd be more likely to have a mind-body issue. I also think you have developed as a person. And as you develop as a person, you're more likely to use more sophisticated defenses and better defenses. And one of those examples is the mind-body defense. I often say that the most advanced defense is the mind-body defense. It's the one that is used by people who are what Sarno called goodists. They take care of other people. They're very advanced. They think about things a lot. They look at things a lot. It's all kinds of advanced stuff. And I think you've just become more advanced. But on top of it, here's another reason that the mind-body defense is used, and this one fits with you quite a bit, Susan. You got afraid by a symptom. You had a mind-body defense where your shoulder seemed to get hurt when really it turned out to be a mind-body issue. But that got your mind going there. It's now a very comfortable place for doubt to rest. And that's why it's happening. Now, this also is a symptom onset or uptick. So based on what I said about my system, you'd think we'd look in the emotions column and see what's going on here. But onsets and upticks can also be caused by doubt. And you've got what I call a doubt trigger. You've been getting symptoms while cleaning a lot. And it's one of two things, or it could be a combination of the two. Either there's an emotional experience going on there, and actually we know that there are some issues in your history with respect to your mom and whether cleaning was okay or felt safe, and doubt triggers because you've come to expect this. That's a long-winded answer for why all this is happening. But my question to you is, and I mean this supportively, not critically at all, but ask yourself, why am I confused about this? Because we've had these discussions before. Not saying that's a problem, but you know this at some level. There's some doubt you're having about it. And you know why it's happening, Susan? Generally speaking, it's happening because doubt is trying to pull you away from emotion. And a big surprise, because you and I have talked about that a number of times. Susan and I talk about this in group. I'm going to talk about my groups in a second because it is a great resource for all of you out there to get support in doing this work. But Susan, I want to ask you that question legitimately. If we were in group, we'd just talk back and forth about it right now. But for now, put your next question in. Tell me what makes you not clear on what this is about. All right, I'll come back to you. All right, Rudy, good to see you on Instagram. Rudy said, just dropping in to say hi, but I'm on the go right now, so I can't really sit here and listen. Just wanted to say hello, pain detective. So he calls me the pain detective in part because the way that I go about things is like a detective. Sherlock Holmes was one of my great heroes in my childhood, and I really do like to think about it this way, that the symptoms are just clues. They tell us what we need to know. And my system helps people figure out where to go with that. So let's talk about this for a second. On my website, www.crushingdoubt.com, it lists all the different resources I offer, but I don't want to overwhelm people with that. I want to stick to two primary resources that I want to point you in the direction of. On the website, the number one way you can come to see me to get regular help, because it's hard to just get better on your own, is to come to my groups. My groups run 3 days a week. It's Mondays from 1 to 3 p.m. Sometimes it runs a bit over. Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. These are all Eastern times. And then Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. And I set it up that way so that people all over the world could have opportunities to come and see me. People in Asia can come to that 5 to 7 time. It's early in the morning for them, but they can still do it. Or in Australia. People in Europe can make those earlier times usually work. And people in America on the West Coast or East Coast can often fit in a lunch break or things like that. You need to be able to come and ask your questions. And the groups have huge advantage in lots and lots of ways. And by the way, they've been very successful. We're having great, great successes with people in the groups. So people come, it's a Zoom call. They are recorded so that you can go back and look at them. Though if you don't want to be recorded, you can ask to go at the end, and I stop the recording and let people go then. In addition to being able to ask questions, there's a lot of back and forth. If you saw what just happened with me and Susan in this Q&A, I'm talking about her question, but I needed to hear back from her to know the next thing. And we just get much further in any one sitting. There's also other advantages as well. It's an extremely supportive group. It helps people feel like, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not even so different than other people. Because a lot of times people think, well, I'll show up and people will think, oh my God, she's got it bad. Listen, mind-body experience is tough. And the group setting shows there's other people here and they support and they're a great group. Now, here's another advantage of groups. And this advantage comes from the fact that you're working with me, which is that in other group settings, you'll go and you might get great stuff. There's a lot of great stuff out in the mind-body community, but it also can be that a doubt weasels its way in. Something someone said got you worried and boom, you're off and running. Well, the groups are something where I'm attending to that. I'm watching to see who's doubting here. How do I bring that back? Why is that important? Because if you have doubt, that's going to keep your thinking in the same place. Doubt is the key. You got to bring down the doubt, and that's when you can see everything else. Now, one other advantage of my membership. First of all, let me say, it's incredibly cost effective. So it's $100 for the month, and you get to meet with me 3 days a week and come to all 3 meetings if you want. And that ends up being, it's 6 hours a week. It ends up being 24 hours a month for $100. It's very, very cost effective. And I do that for multiple reasons, but part of it is that people need access to things that they can afford. And a lot of people who are suffering this way can't work. So they need something like this to get back on their feet and rolling. But I can be kind of your Sherpa along the way. I guide you. I let you know, here's the next step. Here's what you need to do next. So strong plug for the groups. Check them out on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. The other resource I'll point you to is my book. My book is on Amazon. It's called Crushing Doubt. And the book is the most comprehensive thing I feel I could have written on mind-body experience and even the mind-body world. So if you're looking for like something that just answers it all, it's a lot of material, but it answers it all and it can really bring down doubt. Okay, let me jump back to questions. Shelby Geyer, good to see you here. She says, well, I don't like what my symptoms are trying to tell me. LOL. That's a very, very common experience. And one thing I find that's helpful about the columns is, in addition to the fact they get you relief, which is the main thing, they help explain what's going on. It's bad enough to have these symptoms without knowing why it's happening. The columns explain, why did you have an onset or an uptick? Emotions column, or occasionally doubt trigger, but mostly emotions column. Why do I have something that's not budging? Doubt column. Why am I stuck at a plateau? Power column. And there's specific work to be done in each case, and I can guide you through it. And this process kind of gets you unsnagged from things. So Shelby, you wouldn't mind what your symptoms are telling you nearly as much if you were making progress. You know, the symptoms they're giving you clues, but sometimes those clues are very unpleasant, and we want to get those symptoms down. And that's one of the main advantages of the columns is it actually works. It's what worked for me. It's working for lots of people. Oh, I will say this other thing about the groups. One other great advantage is we do sharing wins. And what ends up happening is you hear about all the different ways you can make wins. Sometimes it's big or it's small. It's a mindset shift. It's some hope. It's some step forward where you did get some symptom relief. It's you fought through a doubt trigger and didn't get symptoms. It can happen in many different ways, but it's very encouraging. All right. Debbie A says, book is fantastic. I definitely recommend buying. Thank you, Debbie. The book took a long time to write for multiple reasons, but one of them is that I knew what is like to doubt. And so every sentence I wrote in the book, every word I chose, I thought about what's going to lead to doubt and what's not. And here's the other thing. One thing can solve one person's doubt and raise another person's doubt. So I had to really thread the needle as best I could. I did my best with it, but if you feel at all confused about it, come see me in group. I'll iron out the details. All right. All right, Susan has a follow-up. The only thing I think it could be is my critical mind, and I've been super critical of myself today. I think you're very much onto something. So why today? I want you to think about that. Why super critical today? All right. Now I see a lot of people saying hi, and I appreciate you saying hi. I sometimes notice either a new name or somebody who's returning. Darlene, I just wanted to give a shout out to you. It's been a while. I want to help you with anything. So let me know what's on your mind. The groups have gotten even more cost effective. Come back and see me if you feel like that would be of help. I want to help you get better. So, Susan, jumping back to you, tell me more about this criticism. Why today? And I want you to think about when it started. Here's another tip for you all, and that is the timing of the symptom always matters. So, when I say symptom, by the way, I mean a pretty varied experience, because that symptom can also be self-criticism or obsessional thinking. It does not have to be tinnitus or tooth pain or back pain or irritable bowel. It doesn't have to be any purely physical experience. It can be a psychological one. Think about the timing. And Susan, in this case, I would wonder, what's the timing? When did you start getting critical? Was it after a particular conversation? Was it from the time you woke up? Do you realize as you look at it, and it was actually going on yesterday? Let's give some thought to that. All right. Kathy McGee Doherty, good to see you here. I have an awful lot of pain, and I'm wondering if this is TMS. I've never felt anything so painful in my life. So TMS is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body issues, tension myositis syndrome. You'll hear it by many different names. Mind-body syndrome, neuroplastic symptoms. Sometimes people talk about central sensitization. Sometimes people talk about functional neurological disorder. I call it mind-body symptoms or mind-body issues. They're all the same thing. So let's answer Kathy's question, and we'll go from here. Please remember this, though, guys. When I answer a question, that's just my first answer. That's just the first go-around. This is meant to be a conversation where we keep talking until you get to a place where you're like, yeah, I'm getting confident in this. I have all the information I need. I have the science. I have the logic. I have the discussion points I need. And I have the confidence. So we're going to keep at it. So, Kathy, you're wondering if this is TMS. First thing I'll say is this. When you're having really severe symptoms, believe it or not, that's actually a sign that it is mind-body. This is counterintuitive for a lot of people. They think that mind-body means it's made up in your head. It's not in your head. It's from your head, and then it becomes very real in the body. And in my experience, the most painful symptoms I've ever had were definitely mind-body. This is the worst. So the fact that it's severe is already pointing me in that direction. But this is another good example of how it could be a bit different in group than it is here, though we can still do follow-up here. I will have questions to find out more about what's going on for you, Kathy. So I might ask you, well, where are these symptoms? When did they begin? Have you gone to a doctor yet? And when I say that, I'm not saying because I think you need it, because almost all experiences do end up being mind-body. But it tells us a different story. If you're like, yeah, I've been to see 5 different doctors, they have no idea. Or it seemed to come out of nowhere and nothing was going on. And ultimately, yes, we got to get checked out by a doctor if we feel like there's anything life or death. But otherwise, it usually ends up being mind-body. So, Kathy, I just want to hear more about the symptoms so that I can verify. Yep, that definitely sounds like mind-body. I also want to share with you guys, I have lots of ways to do that, but some of it is simply from my experience. If somebody tells me, yep, I'm having back pain, and I find out that they didn't get dropped off of a 3-story building, then I know that it's mind-body. If it's pretty easy to rule these things out. So my guess is that that probably is going to be mind-body, Kathy, but let's hear more about it, and we'll go from there. Okay, Maria Llewellyn says, Dan, one of my symptoms is bladder pain. When the symptoms showed up again, I got it checked out. May have a potential UTI. got treated with antibiotics, no change in symptoms. I assume it is TMS. This is a strong indication that it's TMS or mind body issues. Why? Because she got treated medically for the thing that it would have been, and it didn't do anything. Now, that's just one rule out. But if you think about it, it makes sense. If you treat for a particular thing and it doesn't get it better, it seems like it's not treating the right thing. If it were from, um, something that required antibiotics like bacteria, the antibiotics would knock it out right away. So it's not that. This is definitely moving in that direction. Now, an interesting question. This is not just for Maria, but for you all, is what do we do in our minds when we come across a situation like this? How do we think straight about this? Because the doctors are going to say certain things to us, but almost all doctors don't know anything about mind-body experience, or at least not much. The best you can usually hope to get from a doctor is that they're aware about mind-body experience, but they won't have any idea what to do about it. Hopefully we're making some progress, and you'll hear more doctors saying, this is mind-body. I actually don't totally know what to do about it, but here's some resources. Included in that is you can certainly come to my website or just email me, dan@crushingdoubt.com. But I'm going to the ATNS conference, the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms conference. And that's a national organization that doctors need to be pointing people to. I mean, I'm happy if they point you guys to me as well. However you get into the mind-body world, the doctors need to start pointing you in that direction. What's happening instead is they're running into trouble. They're not sure, what to say about it. They're not sure even what is going on. And they usually end up casting about and saying, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And they're almost as lost as you are, sometimes even more. And the mind body community can really clear that up. Not just me, but there's a bunch of great professionals in the community, doctors, therapists, PTs, coaches. It's a really interesting field. It has across the board, all the different areas. And we just have to learn to work together and have a unified front so that everybody can learn about this. Okay, well, this is unusual. We don't usually have a break in the action, but that means I'm going to go to a preloaded question, I believe. Now, where do I even find those? It's been so long since I've done a preloaded question. Okay, so here's a preloaded question. I'm going to enter it into the YouTube link. We'll go from there. Okay, this is from Miranda. Miranda says, in group, let's see, in group you said, well, let me pull it up here, sorry. In group, you said that you will feel safe when you know you are safe. This makes intuitive sense, but I'm not sure of the details of how this might work. Could you say more about it? Maybe it's all about, once again, reducing doubt. Well, it certainly is about reducing doubt. But what I'm talking about is, a lot of times in the mind-body field, people will say, you got to feel safe. As soon as you feel safe, you'll be better. But if you think about it, that can sometimes be easier said than done. What do I do to feel safe? And what usually ends up happening, I find, is that people say to themselves, well, I'll just tell myself I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. What do you guys think the problem is with that? The problem with that is most people don't believe it. People who aren't feeling safe don't just suddenly feel safe. Now, if you're saying I feel safe because I've gotten new information, I'm starting to trust this mind-body information. It's starting to make sense. I trust this guy, Dr. Sarno. I think Dan knows what he's talking about. Those are reasons to start to feel safe. What I'm saying to Miranda is you can't really fake feeling safe, but here's what you can do. You can identify in words why you're not feeling safe. If you are not feeling safe, you need to know why. And then if you look at why, you can actually counter why. So in the doubt column, I say observe, articulate, and counter. To observe is to call something into question. And when you're looking at safety around these issues, you've already called it into question. That's good. But now it's time to articulate, to put it into words. Why do I not feel safe? Here's a good example. Maybe somebody, I'm making this up, by the way, but if hypothetically, somebody in this situation could end up saying, I don't feel safe because I don't even know whether this is mind body or not. Maybe there's something wrong with me that they haven't found. Well, that maybe carries a lot of weight. That feels unsafe. So Miranda's saying it makes intuitive sense, but how do you do it? You got to get it put into words, and then you got to look at it. So if somebody's saying, well, I'm not sure if it's mind body or not, then we have to look at what's underneath that. Why are you not sure? And it could be anything. People could say, well, I think the mind body community is full of, it sounds like hocus pocus. Or people could say, well, I don't know if is scientific evidence supporting this. Or I don't know how to go against a doctor. They've done all this medical training. Everything I just said is doubt. It's not going to bear out, but I can see people having that potentially. And then we have to counter that. So to feel safe, you have to actually believe you're safe. It has to be real. And to do that, it's usually information. The columns provide that. That's part of what's good about it. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. Unless questions are rolling in, I'm probably going to wrap up shortly. But Nox Flamma says, hi, Dan. Since you've offered insights on TMS cough/air hunger, it's gone away noticeably. Beautiful. Not entirely. How is it you would suggest one treat their neuroplastic cough? Somatic tracking. Also, any opinions on IFS therapy or EMDR modality to treat mind-body TMS symptoms? All right, let's take one question at a time. Thanks for both. So the first thing, well, let me first acknowledge this. It's great that just by offering insights into things, the symptom has gone away noticeably. That is another surefire symptom that this is mind body. And, we just need to keep thinking about it that way. So you can even make more progress than that. Start to challenge the idea that it can't go away altogether, which it can. So keep going with that. Next question. How is it you would suggest one treat their neuroplastic cough? All right. So if it's a symptom that is kind of persistently there, you want to bring down the doubt. You want to look at what you're thinking and get to a place where you feel like, no, I understand what this is. I'm not worried about it anymore. I know what it is. I know that it'll go away. Just by doing that, that's bringing down doubt. A lot of times you don't need to figure out what was going on underneath. As long as you keep doubt in check, it just goes away. But if that's not working, especially if it's coming back at certain times and not others, onsets and upticks, we got to look at the emotions. So there, I'd want you to think, now, wait a minute. Why did the cough start happening there? Here's a really interesting example of it. I'm reading my book for the audiobook. And there are certain sentences and passages that I find harder to get the words out well. It's like I slightly lose control of the mouth in a certain way. They just don't behave a certain way. Or I might get a little hoarse around a certain thing. And that was usually happening in situations where I was upset about something. So look at the emotions underneath for the comings and goings of it. So the column system is a way that I would treat a neuroplastic cough, and I'm giving you where to go in relation to that. Somatic tracking is that's an intervention where you experience the symptom and you learn to experience it without fear. That could be helpful, but I don't think it's going to apply as much to this cough because a cough comes and goes. And if it comes and goes, it's coming and going because of thinking or feeling, and primarily probably feeling. That's how I would treat it. Let's start there, okay? Now, Nox Flamma then says, also, any opinions on IFS therapy, that's internal family systems therapy, or EMDR, that's it's a bilateral treatment where it accesses the brain through eye movements primarily, but sometimes other modalities of alternating experience, physical experience. And that's a trauma-based therapy. They're both trauma-based therapies. In internal family systems therapy, there's a lot of discovering parts of the self. And it's designed to integrate those parts to say, okay, this is the side of me that feels like a little kid. This is the side of me that feels like a really overburdened teenager. This is the side that feels like a grown-up who's always having to do things I don't want to do. And then we integrate those. So a lot of people have had good experience with IFS. I actually find EMDR to be the most helpful modality other than the columns. When I refer to people and I have them have an individual therapist along with the columns work, EMDR is my go-to modality all the time. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, first of all, the research shows it really is incredibly helpful. Two, I've had personal experience that has been outstanding in it. Three, it's a trauma-based treatment, and mind-body symptoms often relate to trauma. So it dovetails very nicely with how I think about what people need. And then lastly, it's a therapy that can help you without being so verbal. Also very important, because mind-body symptoms often are expressing things that aren't able to be verbalized or we don't know about. So I think EMDR is fantastic. There's also something called brain spotting that some EMDR therapists do. That's a similar type of thing. It helps you access kind of the flow of your mind and just see where things are going, to understand why you're thinking what you're thinking, why you're feeling what you're feeling. And it changes what goes on. So I would recommend, for treating mind-body symptoms, EMDR more, but that doesn't mean IFS isn't good at all. I just know less about it. Knox Lima, let's go from there, okay? Oh, by the way, I will say one thing about IFS therapy. Even though I know less about it, one of the things that I do know is it can be very helpful to identify these parts of self, but with one caveat, which is, I think it was good to not let yourself get convinced that you've got these split off parts of yourself. I feel like IFS tends to move people into, at times, at its worst, can move people into a space where they don't feel particularly empowered, because they feel like, well, this part of me is vulnerable, and this part of me is vulnerable, and this part of me is vulnerable. The columns would work well with that, to integrate more, to say, no, you're one person. The columns help you identify how are you working in any given moment. So top recommendations, columns and EMDR are the top ones for me. And EMDR if it's for basically more therapy work, and the columns for a full educational understanding of what's going on and greater control of symptoms. Okay, Susan says, as a follow-up, Dan, I think I had some doubt that it's TMS today also. I had other symptoms also. My knee hurt and my fingers, so I thought maybe osteoarthritis. Okay, now this is interesting, because I don't mean this is bad news, Susan, but let's just note this. We've been through this. You know what I'm going to say about this. Osteoarthritis has been shown again and again in studies that it does not correlate with pain, which is really interesting, because most of us grew up hearing that arthritis causes pain. That's what we think of. And it doesn't. And let's think about what osteoarthritis is. It is inflammation between the joints. Guess what? The mind is perfectly capable of generating inflammation between the joints. It's also perfectly capable of just generating pain when there is no inflammation. Either way, it doesn't really matter, as long as we can get your mind around this. Your mind is causing this. And the fact that you had more doubt today tells me something. What it tells me is you were probably getting closer to some kind of information. All right. So I want you to think about that. Think about what's the information you're getting close to. We've been on a roll with this, but I think you're now getting close to some really painful emotional information that's going to help you to get to. All right. Okay. Knox Flamma says, wow, many thanks, Dan. Always a profound learning experience. Thank you. My therapist, who I started seeing for my chronic pain and other symptom imperatives, suggested EMDR. Fascinating. I think, get a really good recommendation for an EMDR therapist, somebody who they know directly. But I have had the best experiences with that of any therapy. Jeannie Coleman Coaching says, hi, Dan. Good to see you, Jeannie. And Jamie says, hi, Dan. Hi, Crushing Doubt community. Good to see you, Jamie. Thanks for saying hi. By the way, if I ever missed anything, I did miss something. Rita said, hi, Dan and Crushing Doubt compatriots. Good to see you, Rita. Let's see. We've got Among the Wolves here. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody saying hi. I did see Beatrice said hi also, and so did Dorisa. Good to see you guys. All right. Among the Wolves says, hi, Dan. I hope you're well. Thank you. I'm still working on symptoms and find more and more grief coming up. The emotional content of this work feels like it'll never stop. All right. So let me say something about this from a column standpoint. I find that information can feel quite overwhelming to a lot of people, if they can't organize it, if they don't really know how to think about it, um, how to categorize it, what to do with it. And this is really what the columns are for. So I don't mean to come across as always putting in a plug for the groups, but the thing is, this is where I can help you so much more. Like if you come to group, I can just help orient you to these things 3 times a week. And in addition, there's a website or a community site for all the members where I just answer questions every single day in written form. So it's another way to do it. So when you say, I'm still working on symptoms and more grief coming up, and the emotional content feels like it'll never stop. If I describe it from a columns perspective, it's going to make more sense. Let me say a bit more specifically what I mean by that. So each column is going to provide you with good information and help. The emotions column is going to help you get much more accurate understanding of that emotional content. A lot of times the emotional content keeps going and going and going because you haven't really figured out its full meaning. If you figure out the full meaning, then the mind tends to rest more. It's like, okay, you got the message. You know what's going on. The doubt column can help with this as well. In a way, this is a form of doubt. This is your doubt saying, you're never going to get to the bottom of this. It's just one thing after the next. Well, you need to see what doubt is doing, or it'll get you into those thought loops that don't feel very good. And lastly, and in some ways this might be the most important for your question, is the power column. The power column is where you can get real and full understanding of your entire emotional experience. I often say the emotions column and power column are both emotional columns. The emotions column is where you discover things, you gain awareness. The power column is where you decide what to do about them. And so sometimes emotions feel like they won't stop because you're just getting the content, but you're not figuring out what to do about them. That's a huge part. And it's a huge part of how I can be of help. And that includes just coming here for the Q&As if you want. But obviously you get less access to me that way. So I would say primarily we want to figure out what to do with all this emotional information. All right. Okay, Beatrice says, does EMDR work for neuroplastic feedback loop too? So a neuroplastic feedback loop, as I see it, it's a part of the spectrum of mind-body issues. What is it? It's basically where the entire central nervous system got extra revved up by a really traumatic experience, including of the symptoms. And it just it's a little more, more entrenched. It takes longer to get at because the fear is higher. The obsessions are higher, and the doubt is higher in general, but so is the emotional experience when it comes to neuroplastic feedback loops. So it just takes time. EMDR, yes, it would be really good for neuroplastic feedback loop. But here's the thing, Beatrice, and I say this not to disappoint, but actually to encourage. The primary work you need is doubt work for a neuroplastic feedback loop. The doubt is so high when symptoms are that high that you could go do EMDR work and they'd be so focused on the emotions that it may not do anything to the doubt. So EMDR work can help during a neuroplastic feedback loop, and especially on the emotional side, which you're getting more in touch with. That part, yes. Just don't forget to do the doubt work as well. And not that you would, but just a thought. Okay, Maria Llewellyn says, if I fear right now that antibiotics did not work, or if I have a kidney stone, how can I fear right now that antibiotics did not work, or if I have a kidney stone, how can I combat the fear? So, the first thing is check with your doctor about whether you have a kidney stone. You can rule things like that out entirely, and I would go ahead and do that. I find it's really helpful to get to a place where you feel like the doctors have checked me out. I know what's going on. I don't need to worry about that anymore. That would be the first thing. The next thing is this, Maria. Once you realize that you're in the clear with the medical side of things, what it usually means is that you're having maybe some health anxiety, or you're having doubt. You're just having a mind process that you can't get under control yet. How can you combat the fear? There's a number of different ways, but a lot of it for many people is information. So if you haven't read Dr. Sarno, I would. If you haven't read my book, I would. If you need help going through experience on a regular basis, come see me in groups. I can help you do that. Ultimately, what we do is we talk about things in such a way that leads to better self-talk. Usually what's happening when you're in fear is you're actually saying things to yourself that get really scary. And I help you kind of calm down from that. That's a short answer, Maria, but the bottom line is we got to get you good information. We've got to get the self-talk going in the right direction and get you your questions answered. Because if your questions are answered, you'll feel a lot safer. Okay. Shelby Geyer says, "Oh, I missed the reply." Let me jump back and see what that was, so I can give you a quick synopsis of that. You said I don't like your symptoms. I was saying, Shelby, essentially that I suppose that's true, but you're going to like what your symptoms are saying a lot more when it's organized. When the system tells you what are they actually saying, then they become at least useful in information. But even better, I help people control them. Okay, Healing with Haley, thanks for joining us here. I've been told I have structural nerve issues now because of scar tissue and neuromas, and I've been told I'm SOL, otherwise known as shit out of luck. Not at all the case, okay? Neuromas, scar tissues, these are things that in the mind-body community we know don't actually cause enduring pain that you're stuck with. Unfortunately, a lot of people are being told lots of different things, and most of it's wrong. Because in the medical community, they just haven't caught up to this so much. Now, I have been pleased to find that doctors are open to these ideas. Well-trained doctors seem to know what they're doing, but unfortunately, know what they're doing in that they understand that mind-body concepts are really important. But there's a lot of not great doctors in terms of their training, and that can lead to them telling you scary things like this. I can guarantee you can get better from this. Scar tissue, neuromas, that's not what's going to get in the way of you getting better. What's going to get in the way of you getting better, if anything, is doubt. So you need to get your questions answered. Keep coming to me. Ask your questions. Okay. Shelby says, how do you know when you're clear from the medical system, though? Too much doubt. Shelby, there's many ways to know you're clear from the medical system, but you have it in spades. You have been evaluated by many, many doctors. You've been seen by some of the best mind-body doctors in the field, and they guarantee you you're fine. That's when you know. That's one way that you know. Okay. All right. I'm going to do a little bit of a speed round because now we're running over in time. We had slow questions at the beginning. Now we're getting overloaded. Let's see. Nox Flama says, which would you say is the Sarno book that helped you most during your own recovery? The book is great. Thank you, Nox Flama. So the one that helped me the most, that's an interesting question because Mind Over Back Pain was the first book I read, and it was mind-blowing and opened the doors to everything. But in the reality of it, his latest book, The Divided Mind, is the one that really, really got the job done for multiple reasons, including the fact that he includes other medical doctors. Other medical doctors write chapters in that book. And it was just even more convincing to me. It wasn't just Sarno. It was everybody. And so Divided Mind is the one that I would say. Luann Davidson says, loving your book. Excellent, Luann. Thank you. Really pleased to hear that. And we will keep it up. All right. Amit Goswami says, is stiffness, tightness also linked to mind-body issues? Yes. The way I would phrase it is not even so much linked to mind-body issues. I would say they are mind-body issues, almost always. Stiffness and tightness, almost always mind-body. When I say almost always, what I mean by that is if you collided with somebody and there was a lot of inflammation from the actual collision, that could lead to stiffness and tightness in the short run. Lasting stiffness and tightness, always mind-body, and even most acute experiences of it are actually from mind-body too. When you get up from a car after driving for many, many hours, most of the time people are going to feel stiff or tight. But you know what I found is if you challenge that idea, you're usually not. You're just expecting to be stiff or tight. We've been taught to think that way. Okay. Healing with Haley says, thank you, Dan. Oh my God, I've had ulnar nerve transpositions and had to have revisions. So thank you. We can get this done, Haley. It's not a problem. I'm sorry you've been through so much, but let's get to work on it. Let's push back against doubt. You can get better. Luann says, even if you are not in the clear, there is still validity in mind-body work. Absolutely. Yes. First of all, what does in the clear mean? One thing we can talk about is, and I've had medical doctors tell this to me when they hear my work, they say, you know what, you can help even with existing actual medical conditions. My uncle has Parkinson's. I've helped him stop his tremors with mind body work. Uh, Mind body work helps even within medical conditions, but also in the clear is something we need to kind of call into question, because like I consider it in the clear that you've seen more than one doctor and they don't have a definitive medical diagnosis. That to me, and it all is looking like mind body. That's in the clear to me also. But ultimately, you have to decide that. And of course, we need to be safe to make sure there's nothing bad going on medically, which is not usually the case, but pretty easy to rule out. Getting in the clear is not as hard as it looks. Let's see. Teresa says, been exploring IFS and it has been helpful, but again, I am doing both top-down and bottom-up approach. So top-down approach is intellectual, helping with the body. Bottom-up is getting the body into a more relaxed space to help the mind. Both help. Keep at it. Teresa says that has assisted her. That's good. Okay, Debbie A says, you are supporting me in group to process a trauma, but I'm now experiencing an uptick in vestibular symptoms. Okay. Sometimes when you're processing trauma, symptoms will go up. Here's the thing. In the column system, we can always make meaning of it. So first step is bring down the doubt. I have a flow of my system. It's bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. So Debbie, if that uptick in vestibular symptoms is making you have doubt, bring down the fear. Nothing bad is happening. Then return to emotional work. Then we can get back to processing the trauma, which is primarily happens in the power column. So let's bring down fear and go back to the emotions column and figure out what themes are active right now. All right. I'd like to answer in more detail, but in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly run through a couple of questions and then we got to wrap it up. Noxflama says, I own the divided mind. I'd have to say that's the one I most prefer, also because of how reassuring the data to back up all of his theories. The divided mind is great for doubt, in my opinion. I totally agree. All right. Amit Goswami says, fibromyalgia is mind-body issue. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And Haley said, yes, it's one of the major ones. Absolutely. Fibromyalgia, 100% mind-body. And none of that's dismissive, by the way. That's just good news. All right. I got to go through kind of quickly because I got to wrap up here. But Beatrice says, I tend to have minor accidents from emotional content, but then the panic, doubt take over. Take over. So how to then work with emotional content and doubt when doubt gets in the way? Well, you're getting better and better at clearing doubt out of the way. The key with doubt, once you see it, stop listening to it. It lies about everything. It is a pathological liar. Stop listening to it. Calm yourself down and recognize there's a process that's already underway. You don't need to do that much. And then you can return to the emotional content. So I think the key is don't listen to doubt and understand what its role is and why it's so important. We'll keep talking about it, but we're on a good path for that. Beatrice then said, I noticed that I can have some humor about neuroplastic feedback at times. So that seems like progress. Absolutely. You can't do that when you're super in fear. And no, I would never forget about the doubt because it's so persistent. Yep. So yeah, having a sense of humor about it, it's a sign. And you really are making progress. One thing I say about neuroplastic feedback loops, which are just like the most elevated state of mind-body experience, they can be calmed down. It's the same thing. Can be treated the same way. But one thing that I often say about them is that cognitive work often needs to happen before the symptom relief happens. This is mind-body issues. If we get our minds under control, the body gets more under control. Teresa says, humor is a great tool. Absolutely. And it's very relieving. Laughter is the best medicine, as they say. Okay, Catherine Toomer, we're going to make this fast. Hi, Dr. Dan. I have been listening to podcasters, OCD techniques, etc., for recovery. I realize that it is the OCD symptoms that are still my biggest chronic pain. We'll put in quotes. She put in quotes. I still firmly believe my OCD remnants are mind-body. I agree. The treatments I buy into, ERP, also psychodynamic approach, work beautifully with mind-body approach, but the specific applications are helpful. We'll need to keep up with you to stay in mind-body mentality. Any thoughts? So I think that's great. I'm a whatever works kind of guy, whatever works for you. In mind-body experience, I like to say, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So whatever you are thinking, we got to deal with that. And you're moving along paths that feel good to you. Great. In the meantime, come here or come to group, and to whatever degree you need support. If you need a lot more support, come to group. If you need a little support, you can come here or do both. But yes, I think you're doing great. They don't run counter to each other, these um, ways of working. You know, the columns really just describe who people are in general. And so you can't go wrong. They're just identifying what goes on. And given what goes on, what do we do? So I think you're on a good path, Catherine. Keep it up. All right. Shelby says the doubt of POTS being secondary to something else. You are a very talented doubter, Shelby. But come to group. I'll help you with it. You know, if you think about it, this is just for everybody. The theory that it could be secondary to some mystery, something else, it's like saying the boogeyman exists. You know, we're just scaring ourselves, and society is scaring us even more. That's all that's happening. I got to get you to see that is all that is happening. Amit says how to deal with flares. Primarily, if doubt is low enough, I'd look straight at the emotions column and see what kind of emotional experience led to this, and look at the timing of the symptoms. The timing is exact. The other way to look at it, Amit, is that if it started with some kind of movement or exercise, that could be a doubt trigger that you weren't sure you were going to be safe in. So those are the two things I'd look at. Nox Flamma says points itself. Number 2 most prolific doubter historically. Totally get you. There's a reason I'm good at the work, and some of it is I have been a talented doubter as well. I'm not so much anymore. Natalie Taroni says, good to see you. Hi, Dan. Big love from Australia. Thank you, Natalie. How to deal with fear before a medical appointment. I know it's mind, body, but afraid. Okay. So as always, this is my first answer. I wish I could just be here for long periods of time to keep these discussions up, but I'll be back next week, and you can always come to group as well. But the thing that I like to say before I go to a medical appointment is put on your doubt armor. What do I mean by that? I mean that doctors are going to say all kinds of things, and I want you to focus on limiting how much you're going to listen to them, actually. Listen to them for anything that is life and death. That's it. But if they start talking about pain and other symptoms, what you could do is ask them, like, are you familiar with Dr. Sarno? Or do you know about Howard Schubiner? Or do you know about me? Ask if they know about anybody in the mind-body field. If they seem totally ignorant, then listen to them about life or death stuff, because we have to with doctors. They can really help us with that. And otherwise, we don't need to pay any attention to them. Treat them, as I often say, like a 4-year-old trying to teach you physics. They do not know anything. You have to remember to shrink the circle of trust. When I was getting better, I decided it's me and Dr. Sarno. That's it. I'm not listening to anybody else. And that's what you need to do. I'd listen to doctors about life and death stuff, as I said. But that's what I would do. All right. That's the way to start, is to not give them such power over you. All right. Healing with Haley says, does your book teach us the column technique? I'm new to you. Yes, it does. The way the book is set up is the first third makes a very strong argument for why mind-body conditions are incredibly prevalent and why. It kind of crushes doubt from all angles. Then the middle section teaches you what the columns are, goes through one by one. What are the columns? What are we doing in the columns? And how do you use them? The third section is what I call action steps. And this instructs people on new ways of thinking to implement that system. But the book absolutely does it. I highly recommend it. I have one group member who said that the combination of the book and the groups has been outstanding. So that's another thing to consider. Okay, Nox Flamma says, health anxiety is a real B, but you truly are such a help to this community of humans. Thank you so much. It means a lot to hear that. You know, I'm working hard at this. I want to get you guys relief. I want to make this mind-body knowledge known everywhere, and we're just going to keep at it. Okay, Natalie says, thank you so much, forever indebted. I appreciate that. However, I don't want you to be burdened by any kind of debt. I give this to you freely and happily, and I want you to feel safe. And so you can even come back to me after that visit and say, oh, this doctor said this. Can you help debunk this or make me feel less doubt? Well, yes, I can. That is what I do. Okay, Luann Davison says, yes, amazing book. Thank you, Luann. one of the things I tried to do in the book is get really specific about what to do, because how to implement the system, because some people, that's all they have, or they feel they can't access me, or maybe the group times don't work, but hopefully they do with the way I've set them up. When I read Sarno, he helped me so much, but I felt like I wish there was more. I wish there was a little more instruction, and that is in my book. All right, guys, it has been a pleasure. We ran over a bit, but we had a lot of great questions, and I needed to get the answer to answer them. It's a pleasure as always. I will see you same time next week. That's 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I do see one last question. Do I have an audiobook? I will have an audiobook. I'm working on it. I've recorded up through chapter 2. We're going to get it out to you in the next couple months. I'm going to get it to you as fast as I can. And Luann Davison says, yes, you are very smart. Very sweet of you, Luann. Thanks for the shout out. Okay. Thank you all. Beautiful work today. Keep the questions coming. You must get your questions answered. Otherwise, you stay in the same mindset. All right. I'm here for you. Keep the questions coming. Take care.